Fantastic. Thank you, all three of you, for introducing yourself. Today's topic comes to us with recently with what's going on in our real world, and it's been going on for years and decades. And I think we should, that's why us as an organization decided to come forward and talk about it and have conversation and dialogue and propose some solutions. So we're going to just kind of start this conversation and go from there. This conversation of the way that we framed it was diversity in design. And I'm going to give the floor to all three of you, whether you feel if there is diversity in design or if there's a lack of diversity in design. And I would love to hear your upbringing in design and education from undergrad, what you noticed, because I think all three of you come from different upbringings and went to different institutions. And then we can start sharing that. And I'm going to start integrating questions from our audience as we go. And then we'll be straight up, we'll be honest and transparent about everything. So thank you. Yeah, diversity in design. I'm going to give the floor over to, we'll start with Kevin. I think, Kevin, you have a very interesting upbringing, since you attended University of Notre Dame, which, I attended not as a student, but as an educator. So I would love to hear that and your perspective on that.
No doubt. Thank you. So I spent the majority of my childhood in the Downriver Detroit area, actually. And I sort of always expressed a creative volition through drawing, creative work or whatever. But when it was time to think about where to go to college and what major and these kind of things, coming from a middle class background, and as much as my parents were sacrificing to be able to just send their kids to college or even think about college and all the financial burdens that would entail, the notion of design was just so remotely far away. It felt like in the zone of just merely art, and there was no perception that you could find a pragmatic job in it, at least where I was sort of navigating. It was, most of my neighbors were from big auto, and it was, either you're a business person or an engineer for big auto. That was the two pragmatic paths. And for me, because I like to draw, and the intersection of science and math, those interests were sort of there for me. That commingling led me to really pick the more pragmatic path around engineering as sort of the first step in career. So design was a very distant notion, even when I was navigating Notre Dame. I think I barely ever walked by the industrial design area. I lived in Morrissey Manor, which is right by the architecture building, so I could see the architects actually visibly working in their studio. But my circumstance warranted 4 years. Get your 4 years done, and you got to get a job at the other side. There's no 4.5 or 5 year. You got to get done and out. And I remember the architecture program being 5 years, and that sort of already just sort of excluded the option of being able to even do that. So that's just maybe my early start to thinking about how design maybe fit or didn't fit into my worldview at the time.
Yeah, I would love to hear Jasmine's perspective on kind of going through school.
I guess going through school, I had the same experience each time. When I was in architecture, I was the only Black person in architecture every year, unless we got a transfer. I remember one girl, her name was Elise McClure. She was the only other Black woman in architecture with me throughout the full 4 years, and we're good friends. But I guess I feel like that was my experience all the time, even before I went to undergrad, when I was in high school, when I was in elementary school. I did gymnastics for 13 years of my life, so my childhood wasn't about this creative stuff. It was always about being an athlete, being perfect, having your body in shape. And even in gymnastics, I was probably one of two of the only Black girls doing gymnastics, because it's typically seen as a white girl sport. So I say that to say, throughout my full life, it just feels like I have always been the only Black woman. I got used to it. Not saying that's good or bad. It just seemed to always be my place. That's what I was going to be. If I go here, if I go there, it's only going to be me, or it's only going to be me and maybe one other person. And hopefully they'll like me, but maybe not. But yeah, architecture, the only one. Industrial design, definitely the only one. Industrial design felt even worse than architecture when it came to diversity. And then grad school, there was only 10 of us. So yes, I was the only Black woman. There was a Black guy there, so a Black man, I should say. So it was us too. But that's just kind of how it is. I don't know why. Maybe like, I know for my upbringing, I would say design was never shown to me. It wasn't something that we did in elementary, middle school, or high school. It wasn't seen as something that was like pragmatic, like Kevin said. Like my parents were like pushing me to be an engineer. I was in NSBE, which is the National Society of Black Engineers. I was in that. When we went to our first competition, I did absolutely terrible. I was like, this is not for me. But when I went to grad or undergrad at Georgia Tech, I still declared like undecided engineering because I guess that's what my parents wanted me to do. But once I went to, I guess, orientation, I was able to see the architecture building and see like all the models and the drawings. And I was just like so amazed. I was like, I want this to be me, even if I didn't grow up like drawing or having a creative inclination. Like this is who I want to be, what I want to be surrounded by. This is the environment that I want. And so that's kind of where it started for me. But yeah, even in grad school, definitely the only one. And now here at Under Armour, yeah, I'm the only Black woman designing. Our other Black woman just left. She has resigned. So it's me again.
Yeah, and Spencer, we would love to hear your.
Yeah, the way I like to sum up my experience. So I was born in Jamaica. That's where I'm from, and I didn't realize I was Black till I came to the United States. That's what I always tell people, because for me, there were people representing all strata of society that looked like me. So it was an interesting experience coming here. And yeah, I picked Utah for, like I said, personal reasons, religious reasons at the time. And it made sense. But at the same time, I found myself in a desert of Blackness, if you will, and culture, frankly. This one's really deep, and I don't think we have time to really delve into this idea of internalized racism, even where you kind of question your own identity because no one looks like you around you in your profession, so you then take on the traits and characteristics of the people around you, because I feel it's in human nature to you go into a room and you try and identify the people that look like you. When I would go to China for work, I would always try and find a Black person. Like, oh, okay, there's someone like me. I'm safe. I'm okay. There's something comforting about that. So not having that in school always put me in a heightened state of awareness about myself. And you could say there was an underlying anxiety about everything. So compounding my experience was the fact that my immigration status was so tied to school at the time. It's probably why I worked so hard, because under no circumstance could I fail or slack off or anything like that. So that was one aspect. But on the other hand, I was like, okay, I'm the only Black designer or even student in a half a mile radius here. So I need to make sure that I'm on point, that I don't give anyone any reason to doubt me. So my educational experience was, yes, it was like being on a desert island, and at times I had to, I was grateful I had family close by, so I had that little spot of culture I could reference, if you will. And there were some other Jamaicans here as well in the state, but the population, the community is very small, it's disparate, and so I kind of struggled in school with that. And I think there's this element of code shifting that happens, even where, like I said, you start taking on the traits of those around you. Even how I speak, I don't necessarily speak like what people would typically consider Blackness, but that's a whole other conversation. So yeah, my experience in school was lonely, isolating, but I found comfort in work and just being good at what I did.